Right. We are now moving into the different divisions of law, the Sharia law and all the Sharia law versus the knowledge, the Haqiqa. And then we're going to go, and Lloyd is now going to unpack for us also the four levels. And I'll let him do that because he's a lot better at it than I am. But I did want to just let you know we do need to know these divisions. We do need to know these levels so we know what we're talking about. Also, so we can understand when Muslims are bringing and stipulating what Sharia is, whether or not they themselves understand what they're referring to. So over to you, Lloyd, help us out with these.
All right, thanks, Jay. So I'm going to be talking about how Islam is structured in terms of its authority. Now, I'm going to make some bold statements, some blunt statements, but I don't want people to misunderstand me because people do. Now, Islam has copied, for instance, the Talmud. They've copied Jewish law. This is not to say it's a carbon copy of Jewish law. It is, think of it as a counterfeit, a very toxic counterfeit. They've corrupted, inverted, but they've taken the ideas and they've built a structure that looks very similar, but is not at all morally or legally the same. By the same token, Islam is structured. We all believe that Islam is reliant on just the Quran, and they've through their dawah turned us all into, or turned most Christians into what I commonly call Quran-only Christians. The problem is Islam does not rely just on the Quran. We all know this. We know that they rely on the Hadith, but there are sources well beyond. There's the tafsir. But all of these have been superseded by the legal system, the Sharia. And, well, let me jump into this, and I will then show you and explain as we go. Now, we ended the last set of slides on the capital crime of kufr, which is denying the Ijma, denying the authority of the Sharia and denying the authority of the scholars. This is the consensus of the scholars. That consensus is in the Sharia. Someone raised among Muslims who denies the obligatoriness of the prayer, the zakat, the fasting, the pilgrimage, or the unlawfulness of wine and adultery, or denies something else upon which there is scholarly consensus, which is necessarily known as being of the religion, thereby becomes an unbeliever, a kafir, and is executed for his unbelief. Now, you might say this is not happening today, but it's probably happening in some African country that practices strict Sharia, and it will happen if there's a caliphate. This will become the case, and people have died. I'm sure if we look, we will find examples of this happening today in the 21st century. So understand, they might say, well, this is only valid under a caliph. Perhaps this one is. There are numerous laws that do not require a caliph, just require a Muslim to take action. But this is what the Sharia law is about. And don't forget, this law applies to you too. Now, let me continue here. We're going to look at Islam's two divisions and four levels. Islam, while it also has, as I said, borrowed ideas from the Talmud, because the Sharia is Islam's Talmud and these Imams are Islam's Pharisees, understand that Islam is structured far more like the Catholic Church, the authority structure within the Catholic Church, than it is in terms of just following the Quran. So, because it has the book, it has the secondary canon, it has the traditions, it has their prophet, it has their scholars, and so on, right? But there are two divisions within Islam. The first division is called the Sharia. This is the law. It is the legislative side of Islam. It is the rules. It is the copious set of rules that you follow. These are the rules that when Jesus spoke to the Pharisees and said, you have buried God's word under these rules, this is what we're referring to. There are thousands of rules in the Sharia, some crazy, inane rules. The Sharia is about obeying Allah. It is what is known as the Zahir. This is the outer or exoteric, the external practice of Islam by just following these rules. Even if internally you don't understand them, you just do these things, right? It is the outer meaning or the outer practice. And also, as a lay Muslim, you follow the first plain level of meaning of the Quran, or the first plain level meaning of Islam. Now, this is derived partially, it's a corruption. It's a borrowing and then a corruption of the Jewish concept called the Peshat. Have you heard of that, Jay?
No.
Okay, so the Jews have four levels of understanding the Bible, right? What they call the Peshat. Then you've got the plain level of meaning, or like the literal. Then you've got this allegorical. Then you have this sort of this sublime, surreal, and then you get like this intuitive, spiritual understanding. The top one the Jews call the Sod. Now, this is a similar concept, and for the lay Muslim, they've taken these ideas. So the scholars have taken these ideas, changed them completely. They've made them very secret. This is barely known to anyone, right? And what you have is now on the other side. So let's have a look at the other side. You've got the Haqiqa. So you've got these two divisions. The Haqiqa is restricted purely to the high-level imams, to your sheikhs, to your well-trained, highly trained, specific sheikhs. So this is the knowledge. Now, when I say knowledge, we mean the gnosis, right? This is the spiritual side of Islam. This is the spiritual practice, which is purely for those who are initiated into the high levels of understanding of Islam. This is the Haqiqa. This is the knowing Allah's characteristic, his nature, his personality. As opposed to following the rules, if you're a lay Muslim, this is knowing Allah's personality, which is missing from the Quran. You don't really know who Allah is. And these people, they follow these practices, which gives them this understanding of Allah. This is known as the Batin, the inner, the esoteric understanding. So you have the Zahir and the Batin. Look up those words, you'll see they're common practice within Islam. This is the inner, direct, personal, but also understand subjective experience, subjective knowledge. This is the gnosis of Allah. Now, without looking to get into this discussion, this is not the discussion for now or soon, but do understand that Islam, if you look through the Sharia manuals, it explicitly states that Islam is a Gnostic religion. Now, I'm not going to dive into this, but do understand that the Islamic Sharia manuals all say this, and the scholars, these senior scholars, high-level scholars, are all considered Gnostics. So this is a common theme across this. Now, there are 4 levels. Now that we've got these 2 divisions, this spiritual Islam and this legalistic Islam, there are 4 levels. The first level is called the Ibara. This is your literal level. It is the Zahir, the external, the outer. And this applies to the legislative subjects of the law. The second level is called the Ishara. This is the implied level, the level of allusion. There are signs, there are gestures, there are ideas buried in the text, right? And this is a level designed for the legislative practitioners. These are your Imams, right? This is for people with training in Sharia. Then there's a third level, which is the spiritual level. Now we're on the Haqiqa side. This is called the Lataif. The Lataif are nuances, subtleties. This is reserved for spiritual practitioners. Your final level is called the Haqa'iq. This is the reality, the truth, the Deen ul-Haq, the religion of truth. This is where you can contemplate and see and communicate, where you commune. This is the Islamic form of communion. You go through various spiritual practices and you break through these veils. These are Gnostic occult practices, if you want to think of it that way. And that's a long discussion for another time. But you enter into the throne room of Allah and you commune with Allah and you become the perfect man, the Insan al-Kamil. You become the perfected man. And this is what they believe at that level that Muhammad was. Muhammad was perfected because he achieved that enlightenment by being connected directly to Allah. And this is for the advanced spiritual practitioners. Now, again, I'm not going to get drawn into a discussion here, but these last 2 levels are reserved exclusively for the Sufi. Understand that the Sufi are also subject to the Sharia. They must follow, they must be completely compliant with the Sharia. And then there are several levels, there are multiple levels of these Sufi knowledge, and you become initiate. But the Sufi are the ones who are able to commune directly with Allah, and they pray on behalf of the Ummah. At least this is their beliefs. Now, I'm not saying that I believe this, but these are their beliefs. So while prayer is a universal obligation, every Muslim must do it. He does it as a legislative practice. Whereas these high-level elite spiritual Muslims, their prayer is the only one that goes directly to Allah, and they pray on behalf. This is Fard al-Kifaya. We mentioned that before, a communal obligation. And they consider that only they are empowered to pray, and their prayer is sufficient for the entire Ummah, and therefore they are the only ones pure enough and good enough and wise enough to do so. I'll pause here for a moment, Jay.
Yeah, just so I'm hearing you correctly, the 2 divisions you have at the top, it sounds like it's what you do on the left and what you think on the right. So one is law, what you do, all the practices, and the other one is knowledge, which you actually think and both esoterically and also personal experience. Am I correct on that? So that's how you would, one way of reading.
Yeah, but this knowledge is only given to the ones that Allah has graced with this great gnosis, this great knowledge, the spiritual knowledge. Okay, so this is not for the lame. Now, let me add something to clarify. This Ibara level, the Quran.
I'm talking about the 2 divisions at the top first. Let's start with those 2.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, there's two divisions. So this is purely for the spiritually advanced, for the highly trained spiritually advanced. This is
Okay,
not for the
so
lay
it's not for
Muslim.
everybody then.
No, this is not for the lay Muslim at all.
Okay. Whereas
This is
law is
this is
for everybody.
outside of his knowledge. Sorry?
Whereas law
Yes,
on the left is for everybody. Okay, so what
correct.
you do is everybody is inculcated with what the knowledge and the esoteric inner batin, all that is for really for the advanced, those who are the ulema, who are the
Correct.
the leaders. Okay, now the four levels. One is at the bottom, goes and so 1, 2, 3, 4 goes higher and higher, higher. So it's actually going from one at the bottom to four at the top. Am I correct?
Four's at the top, yeah, four is the highest
Okay,
level. And notice, lay Muslims are all at the Ibara level, the literal level.
right.
They're not allowed to exceed that level. This is their level of knowledge. The Quran sits at the lowest level of Islamic knowledge, and some hadith. So the Quran and the hadith effectively are at the Ibara level, the absolute lowest level of Islamic knowledge, the literal level. This is what they're allowed. Beyond that, they're not allowed to know. They need to go through an imam who has to interpret that for them.
All right. So it's fascinating to me that you're saying the last two, 3 and 4, are reserved for the Sufis, which suggests to me the Sufis are superior to the others.
Yes,
Muslims accept that? Do Sunni Muslims
I
accept?
don't care what they think.
Okay.
But unfortunately, when you read of course, no, they don't. I mean, they'll argue whole day. Look, they will lie about the hadith. They will lie about the Quran. They will dispute everything.
Yeah.
Understand? Now, I know what I'm saying, but is going to be considered controversial. But that's fine. But this is what is written within their documentation. This is what is written by their scholars. If you go into the Sharia manuals, that's what it says. So I'm just reporting what it says.
Okay. No, I this is fascinating because what you're explaining here is that there are many nuances, many different levels, not only for the practitioners, but seemingly there are different levels even for those who are the ulema, the leaders, the
Correct.
spiritual leaders.
Correct.
I've never seen this graph before. I think it's good for us to know that. And I think that's why, in some ways, we need to be careful that most of those that we're dealing with on the internet are probably at the Ibadah level. That's probably all the ones that we
Right.
have contact with.
Yeah, but the problem is, if you're teaching kindergartners, you don't want to be a kindergartner yourself with only access to kindergarten level materials. You want to be a university trained person dealing with kindergartners. Unfortunately, most of us are at the Ibara level as well, trying to talk kindergartners, talking to kindergartners with kindergarten material. We need to be here, talking to them with a superior level of knowledge. We need to know what the scholars know. So I'm coming from the level of these highly advanced scholars from their materials. May I ask you one question, Jay? All of the saints in Islam, what are the saints in Islam? Who are the saints in Islam, if I may ask?
Well, the saints in Islam are those who actually are the compilers. They are, well, to begin with, the highest and best are the
Well,
companions of the Prophet himself.
well, if you do a
Ibn
search for
Ibn
saints in
Masud,
Islam,
Ibn Musa, those are seen as saints in Islam.
pause a second. If you do a search for saints in Islam, you will only come up with one answer on Google. It will say Sufi saints. All of the saints in Islam are Sufi saints. All of the great spiritual practitioners of Islam are Sufis.
Okay,
The
in
Sufis,
that Sufis, and this is, I mean, you're bringing up something here that is difficult for a lot of Muslims. Most Muslims I talk to
mhm,
do not believe Sufi is real Islam. They would say these are individuals who have taken upon themselves, who have stipulated by themselves that they have a relationship with God, which is anathema to most Muslims. How can you have a relationship with a God that is totally other, that has never had a relationship, never come to earth? So they almost look at them as aberrants. They are confused by the Sufis. What you're saying is the scholars all do accept the Sufi ideal and accept these spiritual lataif and haqaiq. They accept that that's part of Sunni jurisprudence. That's part of the divisions within Sunnism.
Shia as well.
The Shia also accept the lataif and the
They will
haqaiq.
follow similar. They'll follow because there's the concept that the Shia and Sunni divide is bridged at the level of this this Haqqaiq. This is bridged at the level of the Sufi. That these two, the split between these two groups, is bridged at the level of the Sufi.
Okay, and just so for people who are not aware of what we're talking about, some people will not even know what Sufi means and what the Sufi context is. For those Sufi are a small group. They're not the majority. They are found both within Sunnism and also within Shiism, and they tend to be uh, led by what we call pirs. Pirs are these individuals who have a relationship with God where they're getting new information, they're getting new revelation, which goes against everything that most Muslims believe. Muslims believe a revelation was stopped with Muhammad in 632. There is no new revelation.
That's what they're told by the same scholars.
Yeah.
Think about it. Where do these Muslims get their information? From the same scholars. They're not allowed to know more than this. They are at the ibadah. They are at the lowest level of knowledge. And the Quran itself is at the absolutely lowest level of knowledge. Ask yourself, what's above that? Think of Al-Azhar University. The current rector of Al-Azhar University, he is a?
Is he a Sufi?
Yes, he's a Sufi.
Okay.
The previous rector of Al-Azhar was a?
Was he a Sufi as well?
He was a Sufi. And while people are well aware that Al-Azhar teaches the 4 schools of fiqh and recognizes the 5th school, the Jafari school from Shia Islam, few people are aware that Al-Azhar also teaches the 7 major schools of Sufi practice.
Okay, well, that's a whole nother subject we've not covered, and maybe sometime.
Yeah, I'm not planning to go into that, but I just want people to understand that this exists, and it's a surprise to many. I understand that, but I just want people to be aware. There's more going on.
Let's see what kind of comeback we have on this. Thank you so much, Lloyd. This has been good. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We are going to get some kickback. You are going to probably want to confront Lloyd, but please, 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 if you're going to do that, like we said over and over again, show from either text, support it from source it within the text itself to see, because we don't want your opinion. We're getting lots of opinions, and we're getting an awful lot of people who are saying Lloyd doesn't know what he's talking about. Have you noticed Lloyd has always supported it in the text of the material, your material, Muslims. He will never source it. He even gives you the page number, and that's why it's so good to be able to get something of this caliber from Lloyd at this time. Thanks so much, Lloyd, for coming around. Let's see how people respond. This is Jay and Lloyd. Over and out.
God bless.